Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Nurse's Corner with your nurse, TANEISHA COLQUHOUN. This afternoon, we are going to be discussing the topic gastroenteritis, also called GE. Gastroenteritis describes a group of conditions usually caused by infection with a microorganism or ingestion of chemical toxins. Gastroenteritis GE usually consists of mild to severe diarrhea that may be accompanied by loss of appetite, nausea, vomiting, cramps, and discomfort in the abdomen. Although gastroenteritis usually is not serious in a healthy adult, causing only discomfort and inconvenience, it can cause life-threatening dehydration and electrolyte imbalance in the very ill, the very young, and the very old. Causes. Infections that produce GE can be transmitted from person to person, especially if someone with diarrhea does not thoroughly wash his hands after a bowel movement. A person and sometimes large numbers of people can also become infected by eating food or drinking water that has been contaminated by infected stool. Most foods can be contaminated with bacteria and cause gastroenteritis if not cooked thoroughly or pasteurized. Contaminated water is sometimes ingested in unexpected ways, such as when swimming in a pond contaminated by stool from an animal, or in a swimming pool contaminated by stool from another person. In some cases, gastroenteritis is acquired through contact with animals that carry the infectious microorganism. Certain bacteria produce toxins that cause the cells in the intestinal wall to secrete electrolytes and water. One such toxin, produced by the bacterium Vibrio cholerae, is responsible for the watery diarrhea that is the main symptom of cholera. Other Vibrio species, often present in raw shellfish, produce a similar but less severe gastroenteritis. A toxin produced by the common bacterium Escherichia coli, otherwise called E. coli, may cause travelers' diarrhea and some outbreaks of diarrhea in hospital nurseries. Some bacteria, such as certain strains of the E. coli, Campylobacter, Shigella, and Salmonella, invade the lining of the intestines. There, they damage cells, causing tiny sores that bleed and allow a considerable leakage of fluid containing proteins, electrolytes, and water. Besides bacteria, several types of viruses, such as rotaviruses and the Norwalk virus, cause gastroenteritis. During the winter in temperate climates, rotaviruses cause most cases of diarrhea that are serious enough to send infants and toddlers to the hospital. Certain intestinal parasites, particularly the Giardia limblia, stick to or invade the lining of the intestine and cause nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and a general feeling of just sick. The resulting infection, called giardiasis, is more common in cold climates but occurs in every region of the United States and throughout the world. If the disease becomes persistent, meaning if it becomes chronic, it can keep the body from absorbing nutrients, a condition known as malabsorption syndrome. Another intestinal parasite called Cryptosporidium causes watery diarrhea that is sometimes accompanied by abdominal cramps, nausea, and vomiting. The resulting infection, called cryptosporidiosis, is usually mild in otherwise healthy people, but it may be severe or even fatal in people with a weakened immune system. Both conditions are most commonly acquired by drinking contaminated water. Gastroenteritis may result from eating chemical toxins. These toxins are usually produced by a plant, such as poisonous mushrooms, or by certain kinds of exotic seafood, and thus are not the product of an infection. Gastroenteritis due to chemical toxicity can also occur after ingesting water or food contaminated by chemicals such as arsenic, lead, mercury, or cadmium. Eating large amounts of acidic foods such as citrus fruits and tomatoes give some people a chemical-induced gastroenteritis. Symptoms. The type and severity of the symptoms depend on the type and quantity of the microorganism or the toxin ingested. Symptoms also vary according to the person's resistance. Symptoms often begin suddenly, sometimes even dramatically, with a loss of appetite, nausea, or vomiting. Audible rumbling of the intestine and abdominal cramping may even occur. Diarrhea is the most common symptom and may be accompanied by visible blood and mucus. Loops of intestine may be painfully swollen with gas. They become very distended. The person may have a fever, feel generally sick, and experience aching muscles and extreme exhaustion. Severe vomiting and diarrhea can lead to marked dehydration. Symptoms of dehydration include weakness, decreased frequency of urination, dry mouth, and in infants, lack of tears when they are crying. Excessive vomiting or diarrhea can result in low levels of potassium in the blood. Low levels of sodium in the blood also may develop, particularly if the person replaces lost fluids by drinking fluids that contain little or no salt, such as water and the basic tea. Water and electrolyte imbalances are potentially serious, especially in the young, the old, and people with chronic diseases. Diagnosis of gastroenteritis. The diagnosis of gastroenteritis is usually obvious from the symptoms alone, but the cause often is not. Sometimes other family members or co-workers have recently been ill with similar symptoms. Other times, gastroenteritis can be traced to inadequately cooked, spoiled, or contaminated food, such as raw seafood or mayonnaise left out of the refrigerator for too long. Recent travel, especially to foreign countries, may give clues as well. If the symptoms are severe or last for more than 48 hours, stool samples may be examined in a laboratory for white blood cells and bacteria, viruses, or parasites. In rare cases, laboratory analysis of vomit, food, or blood may help identify the cause. If the symptoms persist beyond a few days, a doctor may need to examine the large intestine with a colonoscope to determine whether the person has a disease such as ulcerative colitis. Prevention and treatment. Because most infections that cause gastroenteritis are transmitted by person-to-person contact, particularly through direct or indirect contact with infected stool. Good hand washing with soap and water after a bowel movement is the single most effective means of prevention. To prevent foodborne infections, meat and eggs should be cooked thoroughly, and leftovers should be refrigerated promptly after cooking. Only pasteurized dairy products and pasteurized apple juice should be used. For infants, a simple and effective way to prevent gastroenteritis is simply breastfeeding. Usually, the only treatment needed for gastroenteritis is to drink an adequate amount of fluids. Even a person who is vomiting should drink as much as can be tolerated, taking small, frequent sips. If vomiting or diarrhea is prolonged or the person becomes severely dehydrated, intravenous fluids and electrolytes may be needed. Because children can become dehydrated more quickly, they should be given fluids with the appropriate mix of salts and sugar. Any of the commercially available solutions designed to replace lost fluids and electrolytes are satisfactory. Those include the oral rehydration salts or ORS and Pedialyte. Carbonated beverages, teas, sports drinks, beverages containing caffeine, and fruit juices are certainly not in the least appropriate. For adults, a doctor may give a drug either as an injection or as a suppository to control severe vomiting. These drugs usually are not given to young children. As the symptoms subside, the person may gradually add bland foods such as cooked cereals, bananas, rice, applesauce, and toast to the diet. If the diarrhea continues after following the bland diet for 12 to 24 hours and there is no blood in the stool to indicate a more serious bacterial infection, the doctor may prescribe a drug such as diphenoxylate or instruct the person to use an over-the-counter drug such as loperamide or bismuth subsalicylate. Again, these drugs usually are not given to young children. Because antibiotics can often cause diarrhea and may encourage the growth of organisms resistant to antibiotics, they are rarely appropriate, even when a known bacterium is causing gastroenteritis. Antibiotics may be used, however, when certain bacteria such as the Campylobacter, Shigella, and the Vibrio are the cause. Thank you for listening to the Nurse's Corner this afternoon. Before I leave, I want to give you the health tip for the day. Today's health tip is saying, take care of your body. It's the only place you have to live in. Right? Again, thank you for listening to the Nurse's Corner. I will see you again next time on Tops Radio, same time, same place, right here. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Tops Radio and Associates take no responsibility for the opinions or statements made by the host or their guest. Statements or show topics are not necessarily the beliefs of this site or this radio station. It's not our intention to libel, discriminate, make hate, or annoy anyone. This site or radio station takes no responsibility for the opinions of others in the postings of comments in chat rooms or forum posts.
The number one station. It's always hot. Top Radio.
It's always